Hello and welcome to the oddschecker British Masters preview. I'm joined by two experts from over the Irish Sea, the oddschecker's very own golf tipster Niall Lyons and Dylan Beirne from the 15th Club join me. Guys, we were meant to be meeting in person in April to talk about the Masters, but at least we're talking about some kind of Masters this time around, even if it's Lee Westwood who heads the market. How are you both doing? You okay?
Yeah, not too bad. Glad to see the European Tour back, I guess, even though, as you say, like it's not the best of fields, but yeah, so it's good to see it back.
Dylan, how's stuff been with you?
Yeah, all good. Yeah. Like you said, it's good to see some golf back again, and we've got a pretty exciting time ahead of us now over the next few months. So a few majors coming up, so it should be pretty good.
So before we get into previewing the tournament, I should just say to anyone watching or listening to download the oddschecker app immediately. Do it now before we start talking to the golfers. It's the best place to find the best prices, the best offers, free bets, and of course, the best tipsters in the game, including the man on your screen, Niall, as well. The first place you can get his tips when he fires them through early in the week. This is the British Masters preview. As Niall said, the European Tour proper is back after a couple of events with the Challenge Tour in Austria over the past couple of weeks. And that's what we're going to be previewing here as well. It starts on Wednesday. We are recording this at 2:00 on Monday, so about 48 hours until the golf starts. But yeah, it starts on Wednesday, so don't get caught short on Thursday morning trying to place your bets. And you'll see the lads that Dylan and Niall have tipped up have halved in price because they're good first rounds. Fingers crossed that is the case. So before we talk about the tournament itself starting on Wednesday, just, I guess, a word starting with you, Niall, about the return of golf, because from what I've seen, my untrained eye, the only thing I can tell about the return has been maybe a benefit. You know, there are no crowds there, but we're seeing the best golfers certainly seemingly rise to the top, and some young golfers seem to be performing fairly well as well. Are there any angles you're taking from this return when you are looking at these behind closed door events?
Well, there are a few things in my mind before the PGA Tour came back, but nothing really played out the way that I thought it would. That, you know, maybe some of the bigger price golfers and maybe less talented sorts would find it maybe easier getting over the line with no crowds. I don't think that's really been the case. You know, as you say, the cream of the crops actually come to the top in most of the tournaments so far. And I kind of expected, if anything, a dip from the best players in the game. And, you know, that kind of second or third grade getting up and winning a couple of tournaments, of which there has been a couple, I guess, like, but there hasn't really been anything that has stood out for me that with the no crowds or behind closed doors events or the break even. You know, I was thinking to myself that, you know, guys who had went in to the break with no form might have had a bit more of an opportunity or to have form coming out of it than, you know, just to start out again. You know, I did look, when the PGA Tour came back, I looked to the Hawaii events mainly, you know, as a sign of how players, you know, get out of the blocks at the start of the year. And interestingly, there was a few in that event that, you know, Sander Schauffele is one out in Hawaii, and he went well in the first event back at the Charles Schwab. So there's things to look at. Maybe, you know, if you know, the European Tour like does go on all year. There isn't really a break. There's only a couple of weeks break around Christmas, while you get a bit of a more of a break in the PGA Tour. So when looking at the European Tour this week, it's probably a bit harder to gauge how the period off could affect things.
It's interesting to note as well, because of this field, it's a very, you know, it's a European Tour based field. A lot of the guys who maybe would come over normally from the States to play in it aren't doing so. So this is the first competitive golf a lot of the guys at the top of the market have played since the break. So can you take any parallels or similarities from the first event over in the States? Was there anything there, or is it a case of we just have to judge each golfer kind of on their merits?
It's a lottery for me. Like, I don't think there's anything that you can take from the start of the PGA Tour. It just looks like it continued from where it left off, basically.
Yeah.
Not that really, you know, anyone who was in great form, you know, previous to the lockdown has just really continued. It's just the events have been the same and played out as you would have expected. We've seen what's been going on with Bryson, and it was pretty easy to predict that he would go well in a couple of events. Even Ram last week, he was a nice price at the start of the week, to be fair, and he showed a lot at the previous weekend. Maybe one that just got away, but it's hard to judge, especially this first time out in Europe. But maybe my advice would be to keep stakes slightly lower than you normally would, and play it by ear for the first couple of weeks.
Dylan, you work for the 15th Club. For anybody who hasn't heard you or seen you on these previews before, you guys do a lot of work on the data side of things, looking for angles for golfers, for your clients, doing some work with the Ryder Cup as well. So you are very much a numbers man. We could say that Niall is a feels man and you're the numbers man. Is there anything that's kind of been flagged up for you in the first few weeks, or is it just business as usual?
Yeah, we had kind of looked at some of the kind of players that had performed well after extended breaks. So like Niall said, after kind of a winter break or whatever, and they haven't really. Mickelson was one of the better performers after a long break, and he's been okay since the restart, but nothing out of the ordinary, I don't think. And we'd kind of expected one maybe anecdotal thing that the miss in the fairway might be a little bit more penal, because big misses tend to land in areas that have been trampled down or whatever. Yeah. But that hasn't really played out either. So yeah, it's been somewhat business as usual, really. And looking at all the numbers, it would be very difficult to identify the fact that there's been no crowds, or that that there was a long break. So, as Niall said, it's not really it's not really changed all that much. I suppose we've obviously had a lot of winners from the top end of the market, but I think that's probably just a function of a lot of really good players being in the field, so they're taking up a high percentage of the wins. So I think that's probably down to that. But yeah, it's pretty much business as usual, really.
Let's talk about the British Masters then. As I say, starting on Wednesday, Lee Westwood is the host this year, and it's being held at Close House. It was held at Close House back in 2017 as well, where Paul Dunne chased home Rory McIlroy with a 61 on the final day to win that event. And Dylan, you did a bit of work on the course, both analysis in 2017. We've obviously just in the PGA Tour had two events on two consecutive weekends at the same course, although it played quite differently. But at least we have some recent form data to go by. And to what for those people who can't remember the event or don't know much about the course, what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so there's been a few kind of minor changes to the course, some rerouting and stuff for this year, but broadly speaking, it's more or less the same course. I think the takeaway from last time, obviously having Paul Dunne first and Rory second, they're vastly different players. Rory very much a kind of driving, long game centric player, and then Paul Dunne, exact opposite, pretty much an excellent putter, one of the best putters in the world at the time. So yeah, I kind of had a look back through all the numbers. I suppose at a high level on the course, it's a relatively short course, so it's going to be par 71 this year because they've extended one of the holes to make it a par 5. But it's going to be a short par 71, so I think it's in like the top 5 shortest par 71s they've played over recent years on tour. So yeah, there'll be a lot more kind of lot more full wedges, a lot more short irons into greens. That's one of the things that we've picked up on for players this week. So yeah, that's kind of the key. I think in terms of the course itself, or how who we should be looking at, I think there isn't really a standout type of player or a standout kind of stat that we should look at for the week, because like I said, we've got two, looking at it previously, we've got two big differences, but probably I'd be leaning a little bit more towards the good short game and putters. It's not a particularly demanding course off the tee, well, relatively speaking anyway. Compared to the rest of the tour, the kind of penalty for missing the fairway is relatively low, and the advantage for hitting it long is quite low as well. You're not gaining all that much. So, looking at the top end of the market, the likes of Ryan Fox, his distance won't be a big advantage this week, or not as much as it would usually be. So yeah, it's not like I said, there's no kind of standout stat. There's no particular thing I'd be looking at. I'd just probably lean more towards the good short game and pulling players.
And I guess the interesting thing there is you talk about the McIlroy-Dunn comparison, but even though Rory is obviously very long and that's this, the centre part of his game, when you stick him in a field, a British Masters field, he's going to be one of the best chippers and putters around anyway, probably anyway. So it's not going to affect him too much when he got the best player in the world until last weekend. And you mentioned Ryan Fox. I know Niall doesn't need. Ryan Fox normally short starts on Niall's shortlist for any European Tour event, but maybe you can put a line through him this weekend. But Niall, I mean, what's your normal kind of strategy with this competition? Do you have any memories or takeaways from 2017?
Not an awful lot, as Dylan says. Like it's quite hard to quantify what type of golfer will go well here. I was looking at the stats there last night that Paul Dunne finished 4th, strokes gained tee to green. Obviously won it. McIlroy finished 7th, tee to green, finished runner up. Bjerregaard was 5th in the tee to green stats, and he finished 8th. So tee to green and approach play both figured quite highly on the final leaderboard. I would tend to go towards the more accurate players this week. I know Dylan says there's not a big penalty for missing a fairway, but I think the closer you can get to the pins, the more chance you've got of holding them putts that you're going to need to make if you want to get to 20 under par. Obviously, Paul Dunne won at 20 under par. We're probably looking towards the same score again, even though it's not the same quality of field as a couple of years ago. But yeah, I'm looking more towards the accurate types this week. Those guys who don't miss many fairways and guys who have, at the end of the day, when you come to a course, a par 71 that's playing, less than 7,000 yards, it definitely levels the playing field towards those guys who find it hard to compete, on a weekly basis on the longer courses, So I'm looking to, mainly guys those who are more accurate on the tour tend to hit, a fair bit shorter anyway. So that's just the type of golfer I'm looking to this week.
Now, Niall, I came over and saw you in Belfast just before the coronavirus lockdown at the beginning of March. And you and I said to each other that we'd both be having a few quid on Lee Westwood to win the Masters on the exchange before the event. It's the different Masters, but he tops the list at the moment. The host is the 10-1 favourite here. I should mention as well that Betfred are the sponsors of the event, and they are going 5th for 10 places here. So, most firms 5 or 6 places, Betfred going 10. Westwood is 10-1 favourite with Sky Bet, Hills, Unibet. Sky Bet 888 and Unibet. I mean, it looked to me, we'll talk about some of the guys at the top end of the market, and then you can flag up any that we've missed out. But I mean, Westy was playing some of the best golf we've seen him play for a while before golf stopped, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and he's a worthy favourite. It was just tishing it last night, and I was wondering whether I would see any double figures, and I think there's a couple of double figure quotes out there, but I don't think you'll see any bigger during the week. He was 10th in Turkey, 6th at Nedbank, and then won the Abu Dhabi. 4th at the Honda Classic when I went over to the States as well, just a couple of weeks before everything shut down. And that kind of form is light years beyond anyone else in this field. I know you look to hosting an event as well is usually a huge negative with the amount of the amount of jobs you've got to cover, of course, a week, and the amount of media attention you get, and all the things you've got to do as a host. And that's, I would imagine, that's about 10% of what it normally is this week, with the way the restrictions are, and the amount of people that's going to be around the course is going to be very minimal. The amount of sponsors is going to be about minimal. So I think Westwood's job will be a lot less hassle than what it normally would be, and he's a worthy favourite for me, and probably be hard to beat. At this stage, I don't really know whether I'll back him or not, but I'll make my mind up this afternoon. But yeah, you have a funny feeling that if you back Westwood, he's not going to do a job for you, But he started 66, 65 in 2017. He was lying second to Hatton at that stage after 2 days. So he clearly knows how to go low around here. But maybe at the weekend that year, things just got on top of him a bit. But, this year, a lot less to do as hosting duties, and as I say, just playing out of his skin. The form is so much better than anyone has ever shown in this field, and I mean ever shown really. So yeah, he's a worthy favourite, and he probably will be hard to beat if he turns up after the break with his game in decent shape.
I guess that's the key. And Dylan, you've spoken before about whether it's yourself or the 15th Club having your own rankings of players, and does what you see in Westwood's game and his form before the break, does that tally with what Niall's saying in terms of him just being a bit of a cut above the rest of this field?
Yeah. I mean, Westwood at his best is like Niall said, he's light years above kind of pretty much anyone in the field, really. I think for me, one of probably the interesting things is obviously the win was off the back of, I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks he took off, and I don't think he really played golf in that time. So the break that he's had, it could potentially be as much a positive for him as anyone in the field. So definitely very interesting from that perspective. I think just looking at my prices here, I think it looks about the right price for me. I think the potential benefit of a layoff is kind of outweighed by the potential risk of just not knowing what sort of form he's in right now. If this had been played back, in April or sometime back then, I think he'd be a good deal shorter than he is now. But yeah, I just think the unknowns for me is probably going to put me off him. But I think the price is roughly right for me. Yeah.
We'll move on next to the only other player shorter than 28-1, so you can see how open a field it is there, and that is Thomas Detry, the very talented Belgian, is 16-1 at the moment. Somebody who doesn't necessarily, in my mind at least, not Dylan, you might be able to tell me differently, doesn't really fit in with that, with the kind of golfer you said you need around this track. He's fairly erratic off the tee, hits the ball a fair distance. What do we make of his chances this weekend?
Yeah, he'd be one. I've done a kind of a brief model for players just for this course, just looking at, because obviously, like I said, it's going to be a lot of shorter holes. He's like 5 par 4s that are under 400 yards, so and the par 5s are quite scoreable. Yeah, he doesn't really fit the mold. He's probably going to be, looks like maybe half a stroke kind of penalised just from his game, so that pulls him back a little bit. Having said that, he's still, he still is, ratings wise, he's the second best player in the field, so he's justified in being in the position that he's in. I mean, I suppose the course fit element will be a concern for me. I think the other thing is just kind of his ability to win. He's never really shown much in that sense for me, so I think at the price that he's at, he's probably a little bit short in terms of winning, but I would expect him to be, just purely based on his quality, I'd expect him to be thereabouts. But yeah, it wouldn't be a backable winner for me.
Niall, do you agree with that?
Yeah, clearly the second best golfer in the field, so to speak. But he's disappointed me a bit, maybe in contention over the last couple of years. He has been about a few years now, and there was a lot expected of him. I know he got the World Cup win alongside Thomas Pieters, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he has experience in that kind of thing, but it's as Dylan says, it's a short enough price. I think he's around 16-1 to get the job done. And on so many occasions he's got towards the top of leaderboards over a weekend and really failed to hang around on the back nine on Sunday. It's not as if he's been even in the hunt an awful lot over the last 4 or 5 holes of a tournament. He's kind of disappointed at that stage. So. Yeah, he could clearly, it could be a breakthrough win for him. Who knows? But I think for most people having a bet this week, they could probably let it slide around that price.
Yeah, one of those. You wouldn't be too gutted to see him win 16-1, I would say. We're talking now about a player who I think if I could choose any player on tour to go for a pint with, it would probably be Eddie Pepperell. Or maybe be more likely a large glass of red wine, judging by his Twitter feed. Certainly very entertaining off the course, and for a while, was very entertaining on the course too in 2019. But we haven't seen much of him in 2020. A couple of miscuts, a bit of form over in Dubai with an 11th place finished, and then a DQ out in Qatar. So we don't know how much golf he's played. Dylan might be able to help us out here a little bit because I know you do some work with him. But certainly another one who has the talent and maybe a game to take it up on this course. But we have those unknowns about his form coming into it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much golf he's played either. Actually, I don't know if he's been playing a lot in the last while. Yeah, he's an interesting one because he would have been when I initially looked at the prices, he would have been one that it looked a big price, as a kind of standout. But then I looked into it a little bit more and obviously ran my own prices and looked at. He came out around 40-1 for me. And I was surprised by that as well, actually. And then had a look at his form this year, and 2020 hasn't really happened for him. So I suppose that's probably the reason why. And I suppose, like you said, there's a big question mark over, like most of the players in the field, there's a big question mark over how much they played and how they're playing. So, tricky one. I mean, at 28-1, it might be worth a shot because he's got one of the highest peaks in the field. When he's at his best, we've seen him, like the players, and when he plays really well, he really plays. His peak is probably higher than 99% of the players in the field. So
seems to be a player for the the big occasion as well. You look at his best career finishes. You talk about the players tied 6th at the Open as well. He's come second in the Irish Open, second in the Scottish Open. So all of these, maybe more flagship European Tour events, and then you add the players to that as well. He seems to enjoy the bigger occasion.
Yeah, he likes links golf as well. Like not that this is really a links golf course, but it's a homegrown event played in cold enough weather, and there is some fescue grass about the course to punish some really wayward drives. It's not got the look of a links course, but nevertheless he's got the form, and that's part of the world as well. And he's done an awful lot of work on his weight over the last couple of months during lockdown. I think he's lost 2, 3, 4 stone by the looks of the pictures and the videos that I've seen anyway. As Dylan says, obviously we don't know how much golf he has been playing, or how much red wine he's been drinking. It could be, as Dylan says, come out for about 40-1, come out for a bit less than that for me, but nevertheless, he's a risky play probably. He is, and he's even consistent, or he's even inconsistent when he's at his best. You know what I mean? Some of them best performances have been throwing in, terrible performances the next couple of weeks. So he's a hard one to gauge in the market. So his price probably looks about right to me, and it's a chancy one.
Well, let's talk about the golfers then who the prices look wrong, because there aren't many flagship names here. So I don't mind us not touching on the likes of Ryan Fox, Ross Fisher, Marcus Kennel, unless we want to. So Niall, you've been through it a bit. Which players stand out for you at their current prices at the moment?
Well, I've got a short list of about 10 here at the minute.
Perfect.
That's the way Mondays usually start for me, and whether I can get this list down to 5 or 6 by the end of the day is another question. But Westwood was actually top of the list. I still might choose to back him. I suppose I'll go from the top on the ones that I think are probably the most value. I quite like Jack Senior. His 2020 season was pretty impressive so far. 4th in South Africa. He was 30th in the Abu Dhabi, and then 2 top 20s in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. He's got 2 Challenge Tour wins in the British Isles, so to speak, as well. He won Galgorm Castle, and he won in Scotland as well. A 4-hole playoff that time in Scotland, so he's got a lot of form around here, and I think he's, just even looking at the world rankings, he's not that far down the list. He's ranked about 25th in the field in world rankings, and I think there's 80-1 out there. And, I think there are the prices that I'm going to be looking to this week. Probably chancing a right few. Whether I go with Westwood's another question, but I'm looking towards those kind of prices. Kalish Samuja was another one. I think Englishmen, English, Irish, Scottish, and Scandinavians tend to win a lot of events around England and Ireland. So being a Scandinavian helps. But he was 3rd in Qatar as well before things shut down, and 2nd in Cron. A runner-up finish, beaten in a playoff that there wasn't a 6 or 7 man playoff in Cron. And that's a tight track, short track as well. So I think that's a perfect combination, showing form at Cron and third in guitar, because that, like, we know the links connotations with the guitar event as well. So he wasn't out of the top 20 in a run of 4 events last year as well. The French, Portugal Open, Turkish Airlines, and a top 10 at the Nedbank as well, which is a top class field. One of the Rolex events. So I think he's around 40 to 1. He was playing quite well before the lockdown, so I quite like Samuja's chances. I heard you smiling there, Dylan. Is he on your list as well?
Both of them are, yeah.
Dylan, are you sure you just didn't do any prep and you're like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait and hear what Niall says. I'm going to say, that's the same as me.
You've rumbled me. Yeah, no, both of them were actually, they weren't like my top 2 picks, but they were there. Senior, I've got him with 66s and, bit of form. I think I've backed him a lot for top 20 over the past year or so and had a bit of joy with that. So, good player. He'd definitely be there for me for a lot of those reasons. And Samuja, he was probably another one. The little drawback for me was that his short game isn't great. Sort of around the greens and on the greens is not, it's definitely not the strength of his game. So that's possibly a little drawback for me. But I think just purely on quality, I think he's, I think he's at kind of 40s, 45s there. I think that's a pretty decent price.
His price is probably about right. Like, I'm not overly keen on his price, like, but as you say, I think just some of the classy play over the last 12 months, puts him in the mix.
Yeah. In that range as well. I quite like Langasque. He was another one. He tends to be, he's quite a solid performer. He tends to be sort of underrated a lot for some reason. He'd be one. He's pretty solid all round, which is kind of what I'm looking for at this course. Just someone who's, maybe not spectacular in any areas, but generally quite solid. And I'll dive a little bit further into the field maybe. So Laporta would be one a little bit further down. He was 160s, I think, last time I checked. But I suspect that might disappear relatively quickly.
What did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted by that price this morning as well when I looked. Couldn't believe it. He's on my list.
Laporta, yeah.
I think the two, so he missed the last 2 cuts and them 2 Challenge Tour events or something might have contributed to that price. But such a price. I think he's ranked, as I say, I was just looking at the world rankings, 11th in the field he is, like, Laporta. Yeah.
I'm glad I got in ahead of you on this one because I would look very suspicious. He's a good. He's quite straight.
He gets a straight ball too, doesn't
he? Yeah, very straight. Tidy short game. He's actually quite high in. I mentioned the kind of course fit model that I've done. He's quite high in that. I think he's like top 15 in the field, just in the in the fit relative to his normal performance. So. Yeah, I'm making him kind of, around 66 is maybe a little bit higher, but I think he's a big price. He'd be the pick of the field for me at the current price.
What did you make of Adrien Arnaiz? I had him third favourite, and I wasn't overly keen on his chances this week. Like, I wasn't busting the back on, but when I looked at the market this morning, I saw 50 to 1. I couldn't believe I had him half that price, basically alongside the likes of Pabra.
Any chance you're betting at 888 Sport and bet, Niall? Because that 50s is all gone. Couple of blue squares there. So.
Oh, has it? Yeah. No.
Yeah. 40 to 1 best price.
I haven't been lucky enough to get any of that. But he was 6th in Concerts year and 2nd at Valderrama last year as well. Another course that obviously demands accuracy. He was 11th last week in that Challenge Tour event too. I thought there was a lot more going for him in the 40 to 50 to 1 that was out this morning.
Yeah.
40 to 1 now.
Looking at the price here, I've got him. It looks roughly about right to me, that price. But I think he's showing a little bit of form. I think he's a player who's improving. I've kind of had an eye on him over the last year or so as well, and he looks like somebody who's on the up. So I think. Maybe our ratings might lag a little bit behind on some players like that. So, he might be a little bit shorter than that. So it could be a good shout, yeah.
I'll run through another few players here, George, if you want me to.
Absolutely.
I've got another 4 or 5 here to mention. One of them is Nacho Elvira. It's a long shot, but he's won 4 Challenge Tour events, and his best performance has come on tighter tracks. Like, I know this isn't necessarily tight, but they come on tighter, shorter tracks. He was fourth in Cron, third in the Italian Open a few years ago as well, which was another tight 3-lane track, and Trophy of San, which was another one of the tightest, basically on tour in the last number of years, beating in a playoff and that. I think he's 3 figures around 150. Drysdale, last time I seen him was getting beaten in a playoff to Campillo in guitar. Good form. Yeah, 2 top 10s in Irish Open events. This side of the water as well. The breaks, Drysdale's hard to win with, obviously, anyway. But I thought 200 to 1 was slightly big for someone who was, beaten in a playoff last time out in a big event. I quite like Grant Forrest around 80s. He was 6th in the Trophy of San, 4th at the Irish Open in the Hinch, 2 top 10s in Mauritius as well. He's, over the last 12 to 18 months, he's shown, quite decent form on the European Tour. Maybe not quite given the respect that he deserves for that. And I was reading an article about him this morning, actually, that his girlfriend works in a hospital in Edinburgh and was treating coronavirus patients, and I think he was saying that he was quite worried about her, over that period of time. And maybe that just adds a bit of perspective too. He was playing well enough anyway. So around 80s looks big enough for him. I think we should mention Marcus Armitage. He won the Euro Pro Tour event here at Close House a number of years ago, and he was playing all right before the break too, 3rd in South Africa, and he played in the final group that Sunday with Oosthuizen. Grace came through the field and blitzed him in the end. I think he shot a 62 in the final day, but he was 12th in guitar as well. I think he's sitting at around 80 to 1. He's probably the Euro Pro Tour win here has affected his price a fair bit. Like, you would have probably expected upwards of triple figures at least. But I thought he was interesting.
Very good there. So yeah, Armitage, as you say, 80 to 1, as short as 40s elsewhere. So that price might go a bit. Drysdale 200 to 1, Forest 80 to 1. I mean, if people tuned into this hoping to get one bet, now you're giving them about 15. So that's the good news. Dylan, any more, or is that your list as well? Has Niall just rattled off your exact short list, or, or can you add any others?
Yeah, the only other one for me, I think, Johan Veerman I'm looking at his numbers and he looks really solid. He's another one who's, like I said, he's really good all around, good putter, which, can only help around this course by the looks of it. He's slightly lower. He's not as straight as some of the other players that we've talked about. He's a little bit lower in the fairway percentage, but I just looked at the top end last time here, and yeah, it didn't affect him too much. I think Dunn was actually below average in driving accuracy last time, so I'm not too concerned about that. But yeah, just looking at his quality, I think he's kind of 140s or something as well, or was again last time we checked.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Might
disappear as well. So yeah, he'd be one for me, I think, as well. He's a good up and coming player. I think he's had some good finishes all around the world as well, so he can kind of do it in different courses. So yeah, he should be interesting.
And just before I let you both go, Dylan, I'll come to you first because Niall, you mentioned Cron and Valderrama. Are there any courses? I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, so if there isn't, just say. But are there any courses or events, just in terms of looking for an angle, that you would recommend people who want to do their own research look at for a bit of a form line?
Not specific courses, no. I kind of look at that to see if there was anywhere that was a clear sort of correlation, but there's nothing popping up, just mostly because it's sample size, I think. But yeah, people, if they want to look at their own kind of stuff, I'd look at shorter par 4 scoring, and probably approach play from like 100 to 175. The kind of the short approach shots will be key, and I'd look for better short game players, really. So chipping and putting, I think, would be, if I was leaning one way as opposed to short or long game, I'd lean that way, as I said. So they'd be the kind of, there's not a huge amount of this course, like you said, about the stats to pick out, but that's probably the way I'd lean on it.
Good stuff. And if I had to press you both, if you had to back one player in the field, Dylan, and I'll come to Niall after, right now at the prices, who would you take? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, I'd take Laporte at that price. Quickly.
Laporte at 160 to 1, my bet 365. Niall?
Yeah, well, I would definitely agree with Dylan there, but if I had to choose one at the minute, it would probably be Arnaise. Simply off the back of the performance last week was half decent after a long break, and probably forgetting about the top couple in the field, Westwood and Pepperell, let's say, he probably has the most potential out of the lot and behind.
So Adrianus is 40-1 pretty much across the board. That 50 sadly has already gone. Niall, when can we expect your preview to be out on the oddschecker app?
It'll be out. It'll be penned and finished by sometime this evening. So probably be published in the morning whenever you guys.
So hopefully by Tuesday morning, Niall's preview will be up on the oddschecker app. Make sure you download it. As I said at the top, it is the best place to get all the best prices, best bookie offers, free bets, and of course all the oddschecker tipsters across racing, football, and of course golf, which is Niall himself. Thank you very much, Niall, for joining us. Thank you very much for Dylan, as ever, as well. The 15th Club doing fantastic stuff in the world of golf analytics. Hopefully, when we speak again, it might be about the first major of the season in just a couple of weeks.